At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Hey folks, Dr. Doug with Dr. Doug and Friends Radio. Glad that you're joining us today. Adventure. That seems to be one thing I think right now in this pandemic situation that is something that we can all look forward to. And I'm really excited to have Jake Shumate on the show with us today. Jake is probably the most empowered adventurer that I have had a chance to meet so far. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Doug. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, glad to have you. And you know, I know that you're doing all sorts of things. You're a firefighter and you're doing all sorts of other things. Share with the audience a little bit about your story, about your history and so forth.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, so I've been a firefighter paramedic here in San Diego County for just about 16 years. And during that time, I just began to observe patients. And I started to see some things in patients that I thought, well, this guy shouldn't really be unhealthy, but he is. And why is this patient unhealthy? So I started kind of making my own list on really why I thought they were unhealthy. I had my own health crisis about 10 years ago. I was overweight. I just had lost a lot of motivation. And so began on this journey to really find a way to live a really simple, healthy life. And I love adventure. For years, I was a rock climbing guide. I love being outside, mountain biking, snowboarding. And so I thought, how can I combine all of this stuff together? Well, a few years ago, I bought a 1973 Volkswagen bus called the Joy Bus. And I thought, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a show that's going to help people understand simple ways on how to eat healthy, easy ways to have adventure. You don't have these big giant things, and a really lighthearted show. So that was the idea. I created this online show that people can watch, they can feel good about. It's going to help them so they understand, hey, how do I eat healthy? We go to really fun, funky, cool restaurants that are doing anything from like vegan, locally sourced, organic, and just really, I really want people not to need me as a paramedic is really the goal, is to say, how can you go and change the way that you live so that maybe someday you won't need me in a really fun, lighthearted way.
Okay, so more on the firefighting side or more on the paramedic side?
Well, it just depends what hat I'm wearing. So right now I work at a station that has a fire engine on it. And just for your listeners to know, for them to understand what the difference between a fire engine and a fire truck is, okay, this is a freebie for you, Doug, is that a fire truck has a mounted ladder on top of it. And so that means that it doesn't come off. So there's usually a lot less fire trucks. There's a way more fire engines, and a fire engine is basically, it has ladders, but those ladders come off. It's what I tell kids on tours is it's a big toolbox with a squirt gun. That's all that it is. And so on my fire engine, I actually have a whole compartment that's just specifically for paramedicine. So mostly what we do is paramedicine as a paramedic. So you call 911 because you don't feel well, you have chest pain, whatever it is. I'm going to be able to assess you and treat you with everything that I need. But let's say you get in a car accident and we have to cut you out of the car. I have, the jaws of life, as a lot of people call it. We call those spreaders. The bushes are on fire. We've got stuff to do that. Or if your house is on fire, we have to do it. So it just depends what call it is, depends on what I'm going to go do on that. But the majority of what we do, Doug, is paramedicine. Being a paramedic, I would say 95% of the time, what I get paid to do is go help people that are sick or injured.
Wow. And what was the motivate? I mean, what were some of your experiences as a paramedic that really motivated you towards the adventure, towards the health aspect of it?
Yeah. So I still remember this call, Doug. I went and we were going to this place. It was a skilled nursing facility, which basically means there's nurses there that help people because they're too sick to get around. And we always ask what's their name and date of birth. And the nurse gave me this guy's date of birth. And I thought, this guy's younger than me. Why is he in this skilled nursing facility? And I realized he was in a wheelchair. And I was like, well, why is he in a wheelchair? And I asked the nurse, and she's like, well, because he can't walk. And I said, okay, well, thank you very much. I understand that's why he can't walk, but why can't he walk? And what I found out is that he had been such an avid smoker that he actually ruined his lungs to a certain point where he couldn't walk anymore because he couldn't breathe. And I just thought, oh my gosh, here's this guy that's younger than me that has to live in a skilled nursing facility that can't walk because of a choice that he made. Now, obviously, that's an extreme side of things. But I just started thinking about the choices that we make and what we eat and what we consume in our mind, like the news that we watch, what we read, what we marinate ourselves in is then what we become. And so I just started looking at people, and the people that were the healthiest, what I saw were the folks that got outside, that they ate simple foods. They ate fruits and vegetables. They ate things kind of in their simple forms. The people that were unhealthy, really no matter what age they were the folks that never got outside. They just sat inside and watched the news. They'd have their lazy boy chairs set up. They never got up. And then most of the food they ate came out of a can or a bag. And I just said, this is really easy. Here are people almost on the same playing field, same options, same grocery store that they can go to. And one's making one choice and one is making another. And so that was my motivation, was to say, hey, healthy food doesn't have to look like this big slimy chunk of tofu, because I think that's what a lot of people still think. Well, I don't like tofu. Wait, you don't have to eat tofu, And so there's this huge resurgence of these farms and restaurants that are doing food differently. So you can go to, we did an episode at a place called Nectarine Grove in Encinitas, California, that's all gluten-free. And so I've been gluten-free for about 10 years, just really, really helped me feel good. So I can go into this restaurant, it's all gluten-free. But Doug, maybe you're fine with gluten. You would go in there, you really probably wouldn't be able to taste the difference. You would see, oh my gosh, that this food is just incredible, delicious, and amazing. And you would love it too. So it doesn't matter. You don't have to just be, gluten-free or vegan or whatever the restaurant is for you to enjoy that. And then I just saw that, the people that inspired me in my life were, I like reading things about guys that climb Kilimanjaro or ride their bike around the world and all that, but I got 3 kids and a real job and I can't do that. And so I began to observe people that were living lives that I wanted to live, and they were doing really fun stuff that was local and simple, whether it was going for a hike or a run or just swimming in the ocean or whatever it was. And those people had vibrancy in their life. And so I kind of started putting all of these pieces together that said, okay, like I'm putting these pieces together. I'm trying to experience those in my own life. I have an inside look into people's lives that so many other folks don't. When you call 911, we show up. I get to see what your house looks like. I get to see what, kind of what your kitchen and what food you're eating and all of that. So I have an inside observation on really how to help people live a healthy life in a simple way. And I think that, one is the food that you eat, and we can talk more about that. One is just having simple adventure. Like I went for a run today. There's a little trail by my house. I live in suburbia. I just ran a couple of miles. It was great. It made me feel great. It was raining a little bit. It was rejuvenating to me. That was my little micro adventure. And there's an author out there named Alistair Humphreys. He's this English guy. He has this idea of these micro adventures, because I was really disappointed. I used to love to go climbing Joshua Tree. You know where Joshua Tree is? You said you used to live in Palm Springs, so you're familiar.
Right.
It's just far enough away to just make it too hard to get out there. So I almost got depressed because I felt like I couldn't get out there enough. And then I read this book by Alistair Humphreys, this idea of micro adventures. And he says, and he rode his bike all the way around the world. He rode a boat across the Atlantic. So this guy has done these dramatic, huge adventures. And he said, I can't do those anymore. How do I live an adventureful life without having to do that? So he came up with this idea of micro adventures, these little things that you can do. Changed my life, Doug. It's awesome. So you put those things together, and you can do that this afternoon.
Oh yeah. And what's interesting, and I have a personal story about nutrition. Mm-hmm. And again, I agree with you that, you don't want to go overboard one way or the other. But I found that, as I do blood tests periodically, all of a sudden I had really, in this particular case, been eating a lot of red meat. I mean, it was almost 2 times a day. Right. And all of a sudden we watched some of those important blood panels just go right to the bottom. And it's like, oh, wow, what's going on here? And so I called a nutritional physician and I said, look, here's what's going on here. What is your recommendation? Very, very good about saying, well, let's try this and let's try that. And I'm not going to tell you you have to be a vegan or anything else, though I am, is what he said. And anyway, so we started on that program. And so for me, 6 months later, it was miraculous to literally see the changes just by changing my eating habits, getting, stopping the sugar so much and some of those other types of things. So I think a lot of people don't really understand that they can literally affect their overall health just by the way that they eat.
Yes.
So, and I want you to talk more about that. The other thing I think would be fun to talk about is this pandemic, and everybody has been so isolated and self-isolated. And you talk about those micro adventures. I know one day, months ago, I was just sitting here and thinking, I've got to get out. Life has got to be an adventure. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit. Let's talk about the adventure first. Talk about what that does for people. And what are some of the little things that they can do just to get into this attitude of, you know what, life's an adventure and I can get out and enjoy that?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. So important, both of those, the food and the adventure piece of it. And to be honest, like I bought my bus as part of this adventure because some days I just want to get in the bus. I just want to drive. And it makes me smile. It's called the Joy Bus. It brings a lot of joy to me. I have another friend, he bought one and he's always telling me, Jake, I love this bus. I love my bus. I love it so much. And it brings me joy. It might not bring joy to somebody else, but sometimes we need to arrange our lives in a way that helps facilitate ease of adventure. And so the bus does that for me. That's got my stuff to go surfing in it right now. It always has the stove and all that kind of stuff. So even like, let's say I just go down to the beach and I go for a paddle and I might pull out my stove. I'll make myself a little, I have some canned stuff. I have some dried stuff. And it's my little camping adventure to sit down there on the coast. And people look at me funny, like, well, what's this guy doing? Why does he have his little stove and my pot and all that kind of stuff? But it's great because it does something for me and my soul and when I'm outside of my normal and I'm touching real things. And that's the thing with adventure, is that adventure only comes through doing it in the real, doing it in outside. And so like you were saying with the pandemic, is that so many people have decided that they're so afraid to go outside. And what I've seen firsthand as a paramedic firefighter is that those people that decided to quarantine and never go outside got sicker and sicker and sicker. And it's because we weren't meant to live in this artificial world. And I know we're using technology and all that kind of stuff, but the goal, whether you watch my show or listen to your show, I think is that you want people to experience real life, that we're having a real conversation, but it's not really real life for somebody else. And so for them to go outside and to experience real things. And so one of the things that I do that's just a real simple adventure is I might go find some spot, I go for a walk, I move slow. I take it all in because we're so used to, we listen to stuff and we're moving, or thinking, is that whether I'm paddling or walking or whatever it is, I will stop and I will use all 5 of my senses. So I will see, and I'll literally say this, I'll be like, what do I see right now? Well, I see this white cloud and I see the blue sky and this tree over here and I see the trail, I see this creek, whatever it is. So I'm engaging my mind. I'm engaging this. What do I hear? And to stop and to listen. What do I actually hear? Because we become so numb to the things around us. And so what do I taste and what do I smell and what do I feel? And then a lot of times what I'll do, and this sounds kind of, hippy dippy, but it actually is really cool. Take your shoes off, walk barefoot. Feel what the ground feels like. We're so insulated just from being in our shoes all the time. And we feel the ground, we feel the dirt. And they've done these studies, Doug, that have actually shown that it helps people because as we move around, we have electricity in us, right? And we pick up these negative ions. And so when you walk barefooted, the earth is positive and you get this transfer of the negative and the positive ions, and you actually get more balanced. And we pick up, like my headphones in and your headphones in and the electronics around us all creates these things inside of our body. And so not only does it feel good and puts us in contact with real things, but we're actually having this kind of on a cellular level, we're balancing out this negative and positive ion. And that's what people feel good. You think about like walking barefoot on the beach, for example, like, well, why does it feel so good to walk barefoot on the beach? Well, they found out that part of it is because of this transfer of negative and positive ions. So really simple things. Wherever you are, you could be in the city, you could be in Utah, you could be wherever. Find a spot, go for a walk, take your time, don't be in a rush. Use your 5 senses. Look around, what do I see and smell and feel? Then take your shoes off. Obviously, make sure that it's safe and there's not things around, there's not rattlesnakes around on there, anything like that. But then just walk a little ways barefoot and see what it feels like. And so it sounds funny, but these are really just simple, easy things that don't cost you any money. You don't have to buy any fancy equipment. You just have to take your shoes off and see what happens. And I bet you that people are going to start feeling better, that it's done tons for me. So yeah. That's kind of would be a simple way.
I'm laughing because a month ago, if I took off my shoes outside, I'm in 4 inches of snow.
Oh yeah, that would be
so
yeah, don't do that.
It's easy what you're saying because you're in Southern California.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people in back east where it's just been ice cold, in different areas. So I think that you bring up a really good point though, and I think the key to that is that you're out there using your 5 senses. And I think so often we tend to just kind of isolate ourselves to maybe only 1 or 2 senses are being used. And as you say, if we get out and somehow become creative in experiencing those 5 different senses, it really does change our entire energy.
Yes. And if you're in the snow, like I have friends that live in Colorado Springs, and it'll get cold there. And we joke here in Southern California, it's 60, we got to put our puffy jacket on and all this kind of stuff. We're a bunch of wimps. But when it does get cold here, or my friends that live in Colorado Springs, they'll still go out. They won't take their shoes off. Don't do that. But they'll say, I can still go outside. And even if you just put your snow boots on and you walk 100 yards into the woods and you just stop. And because when I was a kid, I lived in Colorado. So, just that I remember the feeling and what does the snow look like, and that cold air when you breathe it, because we're so used to everything being comfortable. So being a little uncomfortable, feeling cold rejuvenates you. It's part of this thing that our soul needs to be healthy, because you can't just eat healthy food. You can't exercise your way out of a bad diet. You have to deal with the mental side of things. So if you sit inside and just watch the news for 10 hours a day, but you eat healthy and all this kind of stuff, you're still going to feel like crap. That's the thing, is that all of these things fit together in a way that can produce a healthy life. And that doesn't mean that you have to be 5% body fat and run a marathon or whatever it is, because that's not me. But I want to be somebody, and I want to help people experience probably more life than they thought they could experience, point them in the right direction, whether it's through eating good food, whether it's through adventure and all that. The other piece I was going to say too, Doug, is community is huge. And that's the thing with adventure. When we do adventure, is a lot of times we do adventure together. And that the pandemic and the isolation that it's brought with people, it has shown that how detrimental it is to try to live an isolated life. And so it's even better if you said, hey, can we go be together and go on a walk? And what are you experiencing? And what are you smelling? And what are you seeing? And what are we? And so now you've combined these 2 things together. And so, there are really simple ways that you can go out there. It doesn't have to be a big deal. You don't have to have a lot of fancy gear, but you can feel a lot better.
Well, and I think you hit on a really important point, is that's community, connection, community. That I think so often we can find ourselves so isolated, and it actually becomes an effort to get out there and find someone,
Yes.
that we can go do some things with. And yet I think it's so essential. So you talk about nutrition. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of people get into this diet and into that diet, and they lose weight, then they gain it back and get worse, and so on and so forth. What has your experience been over the years as far as a really simplified, straightforward approach to eating that ends up being healthier than not?
Yes. Yeah. And, for me, this was maybe about 12 years ago, and I just found myself 60 pounds overweight. I was really into climbing. I couldn't climb anymore. I just was unhappy. I had really bad sleep apnea. Just all these things were affecting my life. And, all through my teens and my early 20s, I was really skinny, like just a skinny kid. And I had some health crisis. When I was in high school, I got giardia, which was this stomach thing that's like, that's from water. And so I always kind of had these stomach issues. And then I swung the other way. And I just began to observe in myself, okay, what are some things that I can do to be healthy? Because I felt skinny and unhealthy. I felt overweight and unhealthy. And I've tried so many diets along the way. So the thing that's helped me over the last 10 years is that, firstly, you can't call it a diet, because a diet's going to come and go. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, do I want to be healthy? And if the question is, yeah, I want to be healthy, then you begin this journey down this path to say, what works best for me? And have you ever heard of this idea of the blue zones in the world? Have you heard of blue zones?
No, I haven't.
That's really cool. So they found, I don't remember who found it, but they found these 5 different spots in the world of these blue zones. And a blue zone is a spot that they have a higher level of centenarians, which is people over the age of 100 that are healthy and vibrant. So they're not living in nursing homes and all that kind of stuff. These are 105-year-olds that are gardening, that are in community and all that kind of stuff. And there's one in Italy, there's one in Sweden, there's one here close by in Southern California in Loma Linda, there's one in Costa Rica, and there's one in Okinawa. And so they've done all these studies that said, okay, these places are very different across the world. What does their life look like? What do they eat? What is it that's creating these long living folks, and they're living vibrant lives? That's the big thing. And they found that really there was some consistency across the board. And one of them was that they were all in community on a regular basis. So, you had the 80-year-old son that was checking on the 105-year-old mother and the grandkids, and they, lived close by and they ate together. And all of them, for the most part, lived really simple lives. Folks generally ate less meat. So they weren't all vegetarians. Out here in Loma Linda, they're Seventh-day Adventists, so they're generally vegetarians. But they would eat meat once a week. In Italy, they were doing it where they were eating goat cheeses and sheep cheeses and all that kind of stuff. And so they really ate a simple diet. So I would tell folks, eat a simple diet. And so that would be, if you can look at it and you know what it is, it's safer to eat than something out of a bag. So you can look at a strawberry and say, this is a strawberry. I know this is a strawberry. I can eat that. Now you can go even further, and there's some things out there that people can do, whether it's organic or not organic. We only buy organic strawberries in our house because strawberries are known to be sprayed with more chemicals. So not everything has to be organic. Strawberries generally cost $2 more if they're organic versus non-organic. But then what you're doing is you're not ingesting those chemicals. So really simple things. There's it's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. People can look it up. It's a list. We bring it with ourselves to the grocery store, and we say strawberries and apples and spinach and celery, all those things need to be organic. But if we buy pineapple or avocados, those don't need to be organic. So you can save a little bit of money, that way with it.
Sure. Again, be a little bit more specific now. What is that list called? Because I've heard of that before. And I think that's really fantastic to know that there are certain vegetables and fruits that you can buy that don't have to be organic because they're protected, whereas others absolutely. So what's the list called?
It's called the Clean 15, Clean 15, and the Dirty Dozen. And what these folks have done is they've tested all of these fruits and vegetables, and they found which ones have higher levels of pesticides and which ones don't. A lot of times avocados don't need to be organic. They have that nice thick skin on the outside of it. They're super protected. Even so, if you buy an organic avocado, you may be paying extra when you don't need to pay. But strawberries, for example, strawberries need to be organic because of the high levels, the high amount of pesticides that get sprayed on those. So you can go online, look that up, Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. We had a tiny little one that fit in our wallet. So we went to the grocery store so we could remember. And it just made it really simple to buy those things. And so easy ways to move into a healthy life. So I observed, oh man, I would go into people's houses and look around. I'd be a little snoopy. And I would see the guy would have a stack of Diet Cokes, bags of Doritos, and cans of Vienna sausage. I was like, I can tell you why you're not healthy, because none of this looks like food. It's 5 degrees separated from its original, what it was, what it looked like. It's full of chemicals. They're all things that don't help people feel well, that are just full of chemicals. So you could go to the grocery store wherever you are in the Midwest, in California, and you can find these things. And so a lot of folks in back to the blue zones, they just really ate simple food. And so that's what I would encourage folks to do, is that the idea that you and I remember, like from the 80s and the 90s, of this low carb diet, for example, was really detrimental to so many people's lives. That this idea that fat is bad and that processed foods are fine. So we got this thing of, oh, well, I'm on a diet, so I'm drinking Diet Coke. Diet Coke is horrible for you. Diet Coke, they've done these studies that people don't lose any more weight drinking Diet Coke than regular Coke, if you can believe that. And there's like 30 teaspoons of sugar in one soda, in one Coke. But then you're drinking this other thing that's got NutraSweet in it, which is this highly refined chemical, and your body doesn't know what to do with it. And so both of those are bad. And so the idea of this low carb diet just really messed people up. And so the way to get away from that is really to eat simple foods. And we've gone to restaurants on the show that are anything from vegan restaurants to places that are raising their own meat and all of those and anything in between. And I've been vegan, I've hunted my own food, I've been keto, I've been paleo. So I've tried all of those. And so I tell folks, you kind of got to try it on. There's no one diet fits all. So like if you went north, you went to the Eskimos and you told the Eskimos, you need to be a vegan. They couldn't do it. Their genetics, their body wouldn't allow them to do that. But you could go to somebody in Costa Rica and you could tell them, hey, you need to be keto, and it probably wouldn't work for them either. So you have to figure out what is it in your body that helps you feel the best. I take a little bit from each of the diets out there that, there's some things about keto that I like that are lower carb and good fat. So I take those. There's things that are vegan that I say, hey, yep, I like that about being a vegan, the protein powders and stuff like that. And I put those together because I figured out over the years that is what works best for me. So folks out there that are saying, yeah, Jake, Doug, I want to be healthy. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to about it. I would begin the process of trying to experiment. Hey, for 1 month, be a vegan. See how it goes for you. See how you feel. If you don't feel any better, that diet is not working for you. Try something else. You should feel significantly better. The biggest thing for me too, Doug, was that when I stopped eating gluten, changed my life. But that's personal for me. So there are other people, they've tried to do it before, and it doesn't really doesn't really change anything.
So what are the foods that are so full of gluten?
So gluten comes from wheat, and you want a bread that's got a lot of gluten, because the gluten is the thing that makes it all like puffy and delicious and all of those kind of things. And so gluten is anything that's wheat based, but it is in anything from soy sauce to sauces and ketchup and breads and obviously pasta and all that. So there's just gluten in everything. So you have to become a watchdog of your, you have to really look at the ingredients and to make sure that it's not, that there's nothing in there. But that's the thing that began the process for me. I saw this naturopath. He told me about his brother who was in really good shape, and he got a blood clot in his leg. And he went to the doctor, his regular my buddy's brother went to his regular doctor, and he said, put him on Coumadin, which is a blood thinner to try to break up this clot. It didn't change anything. He went back to the doctor. The doctor says, hey, I just read this study about blood clots and gluten. Try getting off gluten and see what happens. And sure enough, a week later, after eating gluten, blood clot's gone. And my buddy, who's the naturopath, is like, I could have told him that, but my brother didn't listen to me. And I said,
after not eating gluten, it went away.
Yeah, removing the gluten from his diet, the blood clot went away. And what used to happen to me, for example, Doug, is like I would eat pizza and then I couldn't get my wedding ring off. And I was like, why are my fingers swelling up after I eat pizza? And it's because of the gluten that was in the wheat. And so it creates this, for me, it created this systemic inflammation, meaning like my body just went, this is bad. And it just got inflamed to the point where like I couldn't get my wedding ring off. And so when I removed that, it took away a ton of pressure on my digestion. My back felt a lot better and all of those things. And I just was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And there may be folks out there that are like, well, I've eaten gluten my whole life. What we need to know, though, is that the wheat where the gluten comes from has changed. And so we've talked about, you hear about GMO foods, right? Which is a genetically modified food. And it's where scientists are, they're trying to do the right thing, I think. And they're trying to create more food for folks. But what it's done is it's created some side effects that really aren't good. And one of those is that as they've modified the wheat, the stalks are shorter and the heads are bigger. And then it makes it so that when they spray this chemical on it, this Roundup, that it doesn't die. It kills everything else except for the wheat. But what happened is they've genetically modified it is that the gluten content has gone up. And now this wheat has this really bad chemical in it. And so they're finding that the combination between the gluten plus this chemical in the wheat is creating the systemic inflammation in a ton of people. So if you're willing to try it, I would say give it a go. 30 days, 40 days, get off the gluten. You're probably going to go through withdrawals, like alcohol withdrawals. It's pretty crazy. But when you come out the other side of it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm thinner. I've lost body fat. Your back will hurt less. You'll have less aches and pains. It was life-changing for me.
All right, let me ask you a question, because you're talking about wheat and gluten. And so I've seen in the grocery stores, and I've actually looked for different areas to do that. For instance, you talk about the fake sugars, which are not any better for you, maybe even worse. But so you've got these different types of things: coconut flour, you've got almond flour, you've got almond milk, you've got all of these different things that they're saying were not wheat. You have rice, you have quinoa. Have you found in your research that there is actually a difference? In fact, I was just I just had a drink the other day of some stuff, and it's not coffee. It was something, kind of something cocoa. And I thought, well, I want to sweeten it a bit. And I've used honey before, but then I found my son had brought some stuff over that is something. I have no clue what it is. It's not cane sugar, but it's something else that's sweet, but it comes from a natural root. So here's the question that I want you to share with the audience. When we look at all of these other things that are being promoted, are they in fact worthwhile alternatives, or are they causing exactly the same problem that the wheat and some of those things would?
Good question. So did your son bring over stevia? Is that what he brought over?
No, it wasn't stevia. It was some type of root. I can't remember what it was, but it was derived from some type of plant, a root plant, and but it was sweet.
Yeah. So I think that the answer is yes and no. So for a lot of stuff now out there is you can buy what I would call gluten-free junk food, and it doesn't have wheat in it. So that's good. So if you have an allergy or an issue or a sensitivity like me to wheat, that's better to eat than something with wheat. But just because you removed wheat and you put in almond flour, for example, that doesn't mean it's necessarily better for you. It's better for you in the sense that it doesn't have the gluten in it. It doesn't have the chemicals that it has from the wheat and all of those things. But you have to be careful at what you're eating. And so manufacturers have learned that you can put gluten-free on something and people are going to buy it. Like we have Rice Chex cereal, you know, and there's these different like big companies out there that are saying, no, it's gluten-free. It has just as many carbs or more. It has a ton of sugar in it still, and it still has a ton of refined things in it. And those are not good for you too. So like for lunch today, I had a wrap and it was an almond flour wrap. And the almond flour, it's primarily just almond flour. And all almond flour is they've just taken almonds, they grind them up, and there's a little bit of a binder in it, and it makes a tortilla. 100%. Like I would back that all day long. It has lower carbs in it than like a regular tortilla is. It doesn't have any of the refined things in it. And so folks can go out there and when they buy something, and even so it says, this is the thing, it could say gluten-free, it can say all natural, it can say, I mean, I could put all of those things on motor oil, by the way. I could put a picture of a little farm on it on a can of motor oil. And so all natural, or, you know, put a little picture of a farm on it or whatever it is, it means nothing. And so you have to flip it over and you need to look at on the backside of what the ingredients are and take a minute. And if you don't know what it is, look it up, because there's some words out there that may be a binder or a little bit of a preservative that's not really that bad for you. So you have to look it up. But if you flip it over and you're like, I don't know what most of this is, put it back. Don't eat it. It's really simple. There's a gal out there, her if you go on Instagram or whatever, she's called, her name's the Food Babe. Her name is Vanny. She's got what's her last name? I can look it up before the end of the show. And if you go on Food Babe, she does these great examples side by side, like on Instagram, that says, eat this instead of this. And it might be macaroni and cheese. So you look at Kraft macaroni and cheese, and it's got 50 ingredients from Kraft. And then this other company has 4. Eat the one with the 4 that you understand, even though it's got wheat in it and gluten and all that. It's much better. But the wheat is just, a lot of people have a problem with the wheat in the United States. And so looking for that and finding a safe alternative can really be helpful, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily healthy for you.
Now, have they modified rice also? So you're having the same problems now with rice?
No, for the most part, the most genetically modified food is going to be corn, wheat, and soybeans. And so those are in just about everything. And, you know, the problem is that short-term genetically modified foods look better. So I've heard people say, well, you got to feed the world. And if you look at 1 or 2 years of crops coming from genetically modified farms, is that they have a higher yield. But when you pull out and you look at the 10 years mark and you look at the curve, what happens is you get this big spike in genetically modified foods, this high yield, and then it dies down. Because what happens is they're not taking in consideration the soil. And the soil is really important with the bacteria that's in the soil. So just like in our guts right now, we have this gut bacteria. And this is a big thing that a lot of people have, you know, are saying that, you know, is really important. And so I agree that our gut bacteria is radically important, and that produces a lot of health. And so what we need to think about is the soil's health. And so when you have a genetically modified food like corn or wheat that has this ton of chemicals that sprayed on it, it kills all this good bacteria on the soil, and now the soil is not producing anymore. So you get this curve coming down. Versus some of these regenerative farms that we've gone to and filmed at, what you'll see is that they have a real steady incline and then a level of production, because they take into consideration all of that good bacteria in the soil, and they're actually making it better. And a lot of folks, right, you've heard about carbon sequestering, and carbon's this big thing. Regenerative farms actually capture more carbon than comes out. And so they're actually sequestering the carbon from the air and using it as nutrients in the plants. And so long-term, GMO, we don't know how it affects people cancer-wise and all that kind of stuff. That scares me. But then it also eventually is going to catch up with us, and we're going to lose a lot of our topsoil and just all of that. So when you eat healthy, when you buy food from regenerative farms, you're actually doing making the planet a better place, because that's really important to us too.
Yeah, regenerative farms, what do they do differently to make it, quote, regenerative?
So there's an idea of organic farming, and organic farming basically means that they use very limited chemicals, or only approved chemicals like that are USDA approved for organic. Regenerative farm actually comes to the next level. And this is so cool, Doug, because we've gone to 2 farms now that are doing regenerative farms. And there's this little farm in North San Diego County called Sand and Straw Farm, 8 acres. And the amount of food that they're producing at this place, I mean, everything from mangoes and dragon fruit to apples to all kinds of greens and the birds and the bees. I mean, you just step onto this piece of property and you just feel the health. And they produce a ton of food on 8 acres. And so the idea with regenerative farming is that instead of monocropping, where monocropping is corn, and then you're going to have wheat, and then you're just going to have strawberries. You're just going to have these big rows, like most of Central California and the Midwest, just monocropping. And so what you do with regenerative is you say, okay, we've got a row of apple trees, and then we're going to do some ground cover that's going to help keep the moisture in the soil. It got a symbiotic relationship with these trees. Next to those, maybe we're going to plant some kale and some greens and some other beds, and then we've got some other trees. And the idea is with regenerative farming is that you're using each of the plants and maybe animals, maybe you've got chickens running around and all of that, so that each one of those is actually helping the other one. So you don't have to amend the soil with a lot of there's no chemicals, but you don't even really have to amend the soil very much, because of all of that's working together, really taking into consideration the microbiome in the soil. So most regenerative farmers are never going to till, meaning they're not going to drag the tractor after the yield and turn over the soil, because what they know is that all that good bacteria is sitting in there, and that's providing the nutrients to these plants. And as soon as you drag this till through there, you're flipping all of that over, and now it's all dying. And so the way they aerate, they just use these little spikes they go through. They'll hand pick some of the weeds out there. And so you just get this, a regenerative farm is very dynamic in what they're growing. You don't just have, hey, we're only growing soybeans, or we're only growing corn.
Wow, that's amazing. There aren't that many around, are there?
You know, it's really becoming something that a lot of people are moving towards. And you know, the thing about our planet is and today, you know, it's such an important thing to talk about. And wherever you stand politically or whatever it is, everybody wants clean air, everybody wants clean water, and all of that. The problem is that agriculture produces the most amount of pollution out there, okay? 80% of the food that's produced in the United States goes to feed animals, like cows, for example. Cows are not meant to eat corn. They're not. They're supposed to wander around and eat grass, and the way their guts work and all that kind of stuff. So you have this crazy machine that's producing all of these toxic things that are hurting us. And so a lot of folks are going to these regenerative ideas. They're moving away from this traditional style of farming. They're learning about it, and there's institutes out there and classes and all this that's available for folks. And it's changing the way the planet is sequestering carbon. It's making people healthier, all this by changing the way that we eat and grow food. It's so simple, Doug. This is the craziest thing. It's so simple to say, you don't have to go buy an electric car. But if you go and you find your local farm that's doing regenerative farming, and you say, hey, I'm going to sign up for once a week a CSA box, which is this box that basically this is what we're harvesting this year or this week, for example, and you're eating whatever they produce and you're helping pay for their seeds and take care of things.
So how do people who want to have just their own little garden and are producing, various little things in there, how do they make sure that soil actually is healthy, or how do they make it healthy if it has never been healthy?
Yeah, and I am still, I wish I had a green thumb. They're kind of, mostly brown, so I have my little garden over here. Got some strawberries and kale and some basil and some things growing. I've got some citrus trees going over here. And I'm not an expert at this, but what I have seen of that from the experts is that when you go to the nursery, find the person that knows the best about it. So you're going to say, hey, I want to plant a little garden in my backyard. Who's the expert here at the nursery? Because a lot of those folks that work at those nurseries, that's their thing. And so there's different companies out there that are seeing that this is really important. And so you want to make sure when you look at the soil that you're going to make sure, hey, this is what I'm planting there. And the folks at the nursery are going to help you say, hey, do you want the right amount of nitrogen in here and the right amount of plant solids, or, all these kind of different things, and how you're going to plant it. And so they are really going to be the experts. You can also go to Sand and Straw, where we filmed. If you go to my website, there's a link to them, and you can see they have videos. He shows you how to layer, like put cardboard down and then different mulch and then more cardboard and all these things. So if you have a little container garden, that you can have all that good nutrients in your soil so that you can be growing the food that you want. And then just know it's a lot of experimentation. I have mad respect for farmers. Let me tell you, it is so hard to grow a ton of food out there, but there's so many resources. So I would say, go check out Sand and Straw's website. There's a lot of stuff out there on social media, on YouTube. I point people a lot of times to, different places that are doing it. And you can even do raise a couple of chickens in your backyard. We're going to film tomorrow at a regenerative farm that does just all chickens, and they live outside, and you can watch our episode and figure out hey, how are they doing it? And maybe I can have a couple little chickens running around in my backyard.
That's great. Hey, well, listen, final message. What would your final message be on the show today to our audience?
I would just tell folks that there is healthy, accessible food wherever you live. And so there's a lot of great folks out there that are doing restaurants that are doing locally sourced, and they're working really hard to bring you healthy, delicious food wherever you are. Go and support those folks. Go and support those farmers out there that are doing regenerative farm. Take a few minutes, get on your phone, get on the internet, and find those and support those. And you're going to feel better, and you're going to make the planet a better place. And then I would tell folks, go to joybusjourney.com, go follow and like us, subscribe to my newsletter, go to YouTube and follow us. And I'll give you guys super fun, easy ways on how to make your life a little bit healthier.
Perfect. Jake, thanks so much for being on the show. This has been great. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Great information. And folks, thanks for listening today. Hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to having you join us again soon. Meanwhile, have a healthy and a wonderful week.